at this time. We ask, Lord, for a continued outpouring of the Holy Spirit, and that your word may find entrance into our hearts to transform our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Good afternoon, brethren. Are you ready for another hour?
Amen.
Have you got the stamina to carry you through it? I thank the Lord for that. I'm going to start off my set of studies looking at religious liberty. I'm going to use that as a launch pad to get into the health message. That is always my obligation, to share on health. But you know, our view of life, of the world, is being challenged by the midnight cry message. And we're having to review much of what we've come to embrace as truth about life in general. And we know we are headed for a crisis that will involve religious liberty issues. And I think God is seeking to have us understand what religious liberty is really about. If you look at the history of the Christian church, you will recognize in history that many steps taken by God's people were wrong steps because they didn't understand what true religious liberty is all about. And God has raised up this movement to correct many of those misconceptions. And that work of correction must begin here with us. So we need to really understand what religious liberty is all about. I'm just going to draw a simple line here to illustrate what we already know. This is 1798. And according to the lectures we've had so far from Sister Letwin, what happens in 1798? What happened? No? The first angel's message arrived, yes? What else happened? Time of the end, yes? What else happened? From the study we've heard,
the rise of the SDA and
God raises up the USA and the SDA. Why does he need to do this? Yes.
religious liberty to
Okay, because what happened before that in the 1260?
There was no religious.
The union of church and state. What church was this? Romanism. And the state was represented by what? These are the monarchies. You have the church riding the beast and denying people a fundamental right.
lincisha abantu umthetho obaluleke kakhulu.
So to take people out of this era of darkness,
Ukuze ukhiphe abantu baNkulunkulu kulo mnyama,
God raises up a nation
uNkulunkulu uvusa isizwe,
and He raises up a state.
uphinde futhi uvusa umbuso.
And the two are to be an asylum for God's people.
Lezi zinto ezimbili kumele zibe lapho khona abantu baNkulunkulu bezophephela khona.
So we know that when this church and this nation were raised up,
Siyazi ukuthi leli bandla kanti futhi nalombuso uma uvuswa
what happened 65 years later?
kwenzakalani emva kweminyaka u-65 years.
They were raised up to perform a duty.
Bavuswa ukubana benze umsebenzi othile.
And that duty was to protect the people.
Lo msebenzi bokuvikela abantu.
What happens in 1863?
Ngabe kwenzakalani ngonyaka 1863?
Both institutions go off course.
Zobabili baphuma endleleni.
In other words,
Ngamanye amazwi,
they are failing to either understand the purpose for which God raised them up,
bayahluleka ukuqonda isizathu uNkulunkulu ebavusile.
or they have forgotten why they were raised up as institutions to protect God's people.
Okanye bekhohliwe ukuthi bevuselwani inhloso yabo ukuthi bevikele abantu baNkulunkulu.
In fact, when we come to the history of the United States around 1863,
Uma ubheka umlando we-USA ngenkathi za-1863,
1863 is right in the middle of a civil war.
ilapho khona kuphakathi khona kuba nempi eyenzeka lapho esizweni sona leso.
And why are the Americans fighting against each other?
Kungani abantu balapho kule ndawo bele babodwa?
Why was there civil war?
Kungani bebelwe bebodwa abantu baseMelika?
Slavery. It was the issue of slavery.
Bekunenkinga yobugqili.
If God raised them up to protect the people in 1798,
Uma ngabe uNkulunkulu bevusa ukuthi bevikele abantu ngo-1798,
what was happening here? Why was there a group fighting against slavery and another for slavery?
kungani bekuneqembu eligcizelela ugqili elinye lilo nogqili?
So we see that between 1798 and 1863,
Siyabona ukuthi phakathi kwe-1798 kuya ku-1863,
which is midway in the Civil War,
ongukuthi u-1863 yindawo phakathi naphakathi kwale mpi eyenzakalayo phakathi eMelika.
we have a loss of memory.
Kukhona ukulahleka komqondo.
And there might be many reasons for that,
Mhlambe ziningi izathu kwalokho.
but maybe one of them was a lack of proper understanding.
Mhlawumbe enye yawo bekukuswela ulwazi.
You know, when we talk about religious liberty, we always think about the Sunday law, right?
Uma ngabe sikhuluma ngokukhuleka kwezenkolo siqala ngomthetho wokukhonza usuku lokuqala.
But Sunday law is like the end of a progression.
Kepha Sunday law kuphela kwezokukhula kwalento.
You know, before the papacy began to rule the world in 538,
Ngaphambi kobana iPhepesi iqale ukubusa umhlaba ngo-538,
there was a progressive history from, where do you want to take this?
kunomlando okade ukhulayo ngabe singaqala nguphi lo mlando?
Which year do you want to put?
Imuphi iminyaka efuna ukufaka lapho?
It's up to you what you want. I'll put whatever you want.
Kuncela noma ngabe yini ekufunayo ngizofaka.
When do things begin to plummet? Yes. 321,
321
the first Sunday law.
Sunday law yokuqala.
But before you even get to 321,
Kepha ngaphambi uzufika ku-321,
is there any other year you want to put?
ngabe ukhona omunye unyaka ofuna ukufaka?
When does Constantine move the capital?
Ngabe uConstantine ushintsha nini indawo enkulu enkulu?
330. Okay, all right, fine. We'll go with 321. Okay.
Sohamba ngo-221 sesifaka ngo-230.
What has moving a capital got to do with 538?
Ngabe kuphathelana kanjani no-538 ukushintshwa kwendlu?
The people in that dispensation needed to understand the significance of Constantine moving his capital.
abantu bekade bephila kulesikhathi behlele beqonda loshintsho elenzwa uConstantine.
And maybe perhaps because they didn't have a proper grasp of that event, they came to 538 and were plunged into an era of darkness.
Ngoba abebazange balungiselelwe kahle ngalesigameko esenzekile uConstantine bafika kule ndawo le basebafaka ebumnyameni.
So in this movement, God is showing us how to progressively walk through a reform line. So I hope that we will come to understand really precisely what religious liberty is all about. I'm not going to cover it in depth. But I'll try to raise consciousness to this matter. So what makes a nation great? Because over here we had a great nation. What makes this nation great? Great Controversy 295 paragraph 1. 295 paragraph 1. This is talking about the time period when God is raising up the United States. Making his way at last after months of change and wandering to the shores of Narragansett Bay, he there laid the foundation of the first state of modern times that in the fullest sense recognized the right of religious freedom. The fundamental principles of Roger Miller's colony was that every man should have liberty to worship God according to the light of his own conscience. His little state, Rhode Island, became the asylum of the oppressed, and it increased and prospered until its foundation principles, civil and religious liberty, became the cornerstone of the American Republic. That's in Great Controversy 295, and it's chapter 16 of Great Controversy. So I want us to see that when God was seeking to free a people from oppression, what does he do? He creates a nation. He creates a church. So the church and this nation were to protect God's people. And they were to do that by ensuring that every man had liberty to worship God according to the light of his own conscience. See, we become afraid of religious liberty even within God's church. Because we think if we allow people to have freedom of conscience, they're going to go haywire and do crazy things. So we come up with rules and regulations to regulate their behavior. Thinking that we are doing God a service. But actually the principle of religious liberty is precisely the principle that brings about perfection. And it does not need human interference. I want us to see that today. We are going to now read from History of Protestantism.
Sizofunda kumlando wamaProtestanti.
HOP Volume 1, page 2. Just give me a moment to find it.
Ngicela umzuzwana nje ukuthi ngithole lesithaphulo.
We're going to be looking at the history of the Protestant movement.
Sizobheka umlando wamaProtestanti.
We are all familiar with the Protestant Reformation, right?
Sonke sijwayele inguquko yamaProtestanti.
And I want us to go back into history and just look at what this was all about.
Ngifuna nje sibuyele kumlando sibone ukuthi ngabe lokho bekumayelana nani.
I think we'll begin with page 1.
Ngicabanga ukuthi sizoqala nje page 1.
The history of Protestantism, which we propose to write, is no mere history of dogmas. The teachings of Christ are the seed. Last night, when we were having our devotion, Elder Mawandis emphasized the fact that we'll be speaking parables. Parables were Christ's method. And God has opened up parable teaching in this movement because He wants us to acquire a language that will set us apart from the rest of the world. Because it's the language of heaven, it's the language of God, how He speaks. And when God speaks, He wants us to be able to understand what He's saying. So it's interesting here how this writer connects Protestantism with the seed of Christ being, the teachings of Christ being the seed of Protestantism. And it goes on further to say, the modern Christendom with its new life is the goodly tree, which has sprung from them. We shall speak of the seed and then of the tree, so small at its beginning, but destined one day to cover the earth. Going down to page 2. How that seed was deposited in the soil, how the tree grew up and flourished despite the furious tempest that roared around it. So, what is this writer talking about? What principle is he using? What model? Agriculture model already. We've already come across parable teaching. We've already come across agricultural teaching. And then he's talking about tempests. Where do we find tempests? Out at sea? Sheep? Right? Can it be a sheep? Okay. How century after century it lifted its top higher in heaven and spread its boughs wider around, describing Protestantism. Nursing letters, fostering art, and gathering a fraternity of prosperous and powerful nations around it. It will be our business in the following pages to show. Meanwhile, we wish it to be noted that this is what we understand by the Protestantism on the history of which we are now entering. Viewed thus, and any narrower view would be untrue, alike to philosophy and to fact. He says, the history of Protestantism is the record of one of the greatest dramas of all time. It is true, no doubt, that Protestantism, strictly viewed, is simply a principle. It is not a policy. It is not an empire having its fleets and armies, its officers and tribunals, wherewith to extend its dominion and make its authority be obeyed. It is not even a church with its hierarchies and synods and edicts. It is simply a principle. But it is the greatest of all principles. It is a creative power.
Amen.
Religious liberty,
Ukhululeka kwezenkolo,
which is embodied in Protestantism,
okutholakala ku-Protestantism,
has a creative power in it.
inamandla wokudala.
When an individual is denied religious liberty,
Uma ngabe umuntu encishwa inkululeko yokuthi ekhole ngalendlela efuna ngakhona,
their creativity is being stifled
ukudala kwabo kuyanciphiswa,
and killed.
kuphinde futhi kubulawa.
Continues to say, its plastic influence is all-embracing. It penetrates into the heart and renews the individual. And we're going to see how that happens.
Sizobona ukuthi lokho kwenzeka kanjani.
It goes down to the depths, and by its omnipotent but noiseless energy, vivifies and regenerates society. It thus becomes the creator of all that is true and lovely and great, the founder of free kingdoms, the mother of pure churches. The globe itself it claims as a stage, not too wide for the manifestation of its beneficent action, and the whole domain of terrestrial affairs is deemed a sphere, not too vast to fill with the spirit and ruled by its law. So, having described the spirit or this principle
Njengoba sekuchaziwe lesi simamiso
of creativity, of Protestantism,
kokudala kwamaProtestant,
he's now going to try and explain where did it come from.
uzochaza ukuthi manje sibuyaphi lesi simiso.
Where did the spirit of Protestantism begin?
Ngabe umoya wamaProtestant uqaleni?
It's a question.
Umbuzo lo.
Yes?
So it says Christ was a Protestant.
Yes? So you're marking the life of Christ, okay? Anyone else? That's good. Yes, my brother? It originated with God, so where on a timeline you want to put it?
From creation.
From creation? Maybe okay, let's continue to read. Before we read the next paragraph, I want to just draw another line here. To say that we are now in 2019. And when you go back to the Diet of Spires in 1529, what do we have happening here? What happened in 1529? The protest of the princes. Because that's where the word Protestantism comes from, right? The modern use of the word. It was the protest of the princes during the Reformation. And this is 490 years to 2019. How can we use this number? It's a number that represents what? Probationary time. So our probation as priests closing soon, 2019.
Umusa wamapristi uyavalwa masinyane ngo-2019.
And this probationary time taking us back to 1529 when the princes protested.
Isithatha isimiki sabo 1529 lapho khona sithola ama-princess protest.
God declares the end from the beginning.
uNkulunkulu ubonisa isiphetho kusukela ekuqaleni.
So what are you and I expected to do as priests?
Ngabe mina nawe njengamapristi simele ubana senze kanjani?
Should we be protesting?
Ngabe kumele siprotest?
Against what?
Siproteste mayelana nani?
Because this is all about the spirit of Protestantism.
Ngokuba konke lokumayelana nomoya wokuprotesta.
God wants religious liberty to be fully established among his people in this movement.
uNkulunkulu ufuna inkululeko yokukhonza ukuthi izinze kubantu balohambo lolu.
And that cannot happen if we are not understanding the terms
Lo akusoze kwenzeke uma singaqondi lamagama
or the principle itself.
okanye lesimiso sona ngokwaso.
So let's continue with the reading here.
Soqhubeka sifunde.
It says, whence came this principle? The name Protestantism is very recent. The thing itself is very ancient. The term Protestantism is scarcely older than 350 years. It dates from the protest which the Lutheran princes gave into the Diet of Spires in 1529. Restricted to its historical signification, Protestantism is purely negative. It only defines the attitude taken up at a great historical era by one party in Christendom with reference to another party. When we talk about 1529, you have two groups of people professing to be Christians in conflict. And this tends to put a negative connotation to the word Protestantism. And I believe this is one of the reasons why we misunderstand the term. But talking about the princes, it says the men who handed in this protest did not wish to create a mere void. If they disowned the creed and threw off the yoke of Rome, it was that they might plant a purer faith and restore the government of a higher law. They replaced the authority of the infallibility with the authority of the Word of God. The long and dismal obscuration of centuries they dispelled, that the twin stars of liberty and knowledge might shine forth, and that conscience being unbound, the intellect might awake from its deep somnolency. Somnolency means sleep. And human society, renewing its youth, might, after its halt of 1,000 years, resume its march towards its high goal. I know it's a mouthful. Let me try to break it down. What it's saying here, that the princes were not just rising up to protest against the Roman Church that was oppressing them. They were seeking to re-establish the purpose of the Christian Church. That church that was established by Christ. Because they understood that it is only through true liberty that creativity can be given a place to exist. They understood that when the conscience is liberated and freed from bondage, and that people are permitted to wake up out of sleep. I will stop right there. By the way,
ngizoma lapho.
When are we supposed to wake up?
Ngabe kumele sivuke nini?
Midnight.
Phakathi kobusuku.
So when was our midnight?
Phakathi kobusuku bethu nokuningi.
Our midnight.
Phakathi kobusuku bethu nokuningi.
2014 was our midnight.
2014 phakathi kobusuku.
As of midnight, you and I are supposed to be waking up out of sleep.
Sukela kulesikhathi leso mina na kumele sivuke ekuthomeni bethu.
I'm saying that the understanding of true religious liberty is connected with an awakening, with the midnight cry message.
Ngithi inkululeko kwezonkolo kuhambiselana nomyalezo wemina ekhaya.
And the purpose of this is to free the conscience,
Inhloso yalo ukuthi ukhulule unembeza
so that the intellect may wake up.
ukuze lokuqonda kuzovuka.
There's a connection between the conscience and the intellect.
Kunokuhambiselana phakathi konembeza nokuqonda.
You know, we're going to look at why God created us,
Sizobheka ukuthi kungani uNkulunkulu esidalile.
because it's all part of what we need to understand.
Ngokuba kuyingxenye lokumele siqonde.
So some of us, God has gifted us with existence,
Abanye bethu uNkulunkulu usiphile ukuthi bekhona
with life
ngempilo
and a body,
nomzimba.
and we've been running with it for some years
Besoloko sigijima ngawe iminyaka eminingi
without even having understood why God gave it to us.
Singaqondi ukuthi uNkulunkulu usinikezelile.
It's like you have a gadget
Kufana ukuthi unalo makhalekhukhwini
and you don't know why you have it.
awazi isizathu sokuthi kungani unayo.
And you may end up having a really fantastic, amazing gadget that can do amazing things and is sitting on the shelf.
Uzogcina ube nalomakhalekhukhwini nje omuhle kakhulu wenza izinto ezisimangaliso kepha uhleli ungesebenzi.
Not tapped in, not utilized,
Ungasetshenziswa.
left on the shelf to rust and die.
Uhleli nje lapha ekhabetheni ukuthi uphele nje uze
Until someone who understands its value finds it.
kuze kufike umuntu oqonda ukuthi ubaleka kangakanani.
So since midnight, we're expected to wake up
Sukela ku midnight silindele ubana sivuke.
to the realization why you have a body,
Sivuke ukuthi siqonde ukuthi kungani sinomzimba.
what the purpose of that is.
Ngabe yini inhloso yalokho?
Is connected with religious liberty.
Kuhambiselana nokukhululeka kwezenkolo.
Because we are conscious beings, you know.
Singabantu abanonembeza.
This body is only the house in which I live, right?
Lo mzimba yilo khona kuphila khona.
So nature of man studies have clarified that matter.
Izifundo ezibonisa umuntu zibonisile lokho.
God has given us an intellect.
uNkulunkulu sipho ukuqonda.
But if that intellect is under bondage,
Uma ngabe lokuqonda lokho phakathi kwencindezelo,
it will not be able to function.
awusoze wakhona ukusebenza.
And so in understanding religious liberty
Ngokuqonda ukukhululeka kwezenkolo
is so that we can see the connection between you and liberty and your intellect.
ukuthi khona ukubona wena nenkululeko kanye futhi nokuqonda.
So that we may wake up out of sleep
Sivuke ebuthongweni
and do the work that God has appointed us to do.
senze umsebenzi lo uNkulunkulu efuna siwenze.
So Protestantism is an active power.
uProtestanti ngamandla asebenzayo.
This is what makes a nation great.
Lokhu kwenza isizwe sibe sikhulu.
So in 1798, when God creates the nation of the US,
Ngo-1798 ngenkathi uNkulunkulu enza umbuso wase-USA
it has two horns.
inamaphondo amabili.
These are the horns that make America great.
Ngiwo lamaphondo lawa enze iMelika ubana libe likhulu.
Everybody in the world knows America is the greatest nation on earth. They might not be the richest,
Wonke umuntu emhlabeni uyazi ukuthi iMelika umbuso omkhulu. Mhlawumbe banayo imali eningi.
you know, if you look at statistics, they may say that the cost of the level of, how do I say it? You know, they say countries in the Middle East like the Emirates, for example.
Bathi izizifana njengama-Emirates
The income per person
imali etholakalayo ngomuntu ngamunye
is higher than the US.
iphezulu ukudlula kulabo base-US.
But we don't identify the Emirates as a great nation, right?
Kepha asiboni i-Emirates njengesizwe esikhulu.
It's the US. because it guarantees civil and religious liberty. It took the people out of the bondage of Romanism and the monarchy. And created an asylum where people could worship God according to the dictates of their own conscience. And be able to determine who their leaders will be. It is this freedom that made America great. And the same spirit is to be in the church. To make a church great in the eyes of God is that the religious liberties of the people need to be protected. I have lost my page, but I'll find it just now. Yes, we're still on page 2 and we're going down to page 2.5, paragraph 5. Protestantism is a principle which has its origin outside human society. So it does not begin with the protest of the princes. It says it is a divine graft on the intellectual and moral nature of man, whereby new vitalities and forces are introduced into it, and the human stem yields henceforth a nobler fruit. So we're still talking about agriculture. That this seed is planted into the ground. It's going to grow up into a tree. And this is a noble tree. Why is it a noble tree? Because the intellects of the members of that society have been elevated. But when you have, when you talk about grafting, it's an agricultural principle. I live on a farm, so we have orange trees that were grafted onto lemon trees, lemon stumps. Because the lemon apparently is more drought resistant than the orange tree. But you know, because the farm was not taken care of, we have come up with a term to describe the fruits that come of those trees. We call them lemoranges. Lemorange. It's a cross between a lemon and an orange. It's a very terrible taste. It's not edible. The fruit is totally unedible. It's very. Because the fruits were not taken care of when they were growing, when they were abandoned. The farm was abandoned and the trees became damaged. But really the tree that's grafted onto the stem receives its nourishment from the stem. The principle of Protestantism is a divine graft on the intellectual and moral nature of man. So we can't even talk about the union of the divine and the human without considering the principle of Protestantism. So we're busy dealing with the end product without even understanding where it should come from.
sisebenza ngaloko sisebenza ngesiphetho sengaqondile ukuthi kubuya.
So then we end up making mistakes
Bese siba namaphutha esiwenzayo
in the way we conduct our lives, one with another, and even our relationship with God.
indlela esiphathana ngayo thina futhi nendlela esiba nohlobo noNkulunkulu.
The statement continues to say that it is a descent of a heaven-born influence which allies itself with all the instincts and powers of the individual, and with all the laws and cravings of society, and which, quickening both the individual and the social being into a new life, and directing their efforts to nobler objects, permits the highest development of which humanity is capable, and the fullest possible accomplishment of all its grand ends. In a word, Protestantism is revived Christianity. I really don't have the words to explain, to break this down.
Anginawo amazwi ukuchaza lokho.
Just go read it yourself.
Ngicela ukubana ngamunye ngamunye sami sokufunda.
Because when religious liberty is exercised to its fullest extent,
Ngokuba inkululeko kwezenkolo uma ngabe isetshenziswa ngendlela efanele.
this is the thing that triggers nobler existence in a human being.
Lokhu yinto eyenza ukuthi umuntu aphile ngendlela efanele.
So you know what's happening now in the political world in the US.
Siyazi ukuthi kwenzakalani manje kwezepolitiki eAmerica.
The Republican Party is connected with the Christian right?
Iqembu lama-Republic lihamba nalabo bamela amalungelo weKristu.
The Christian right feels that the morality of the nation is on the decline.
Laba abamela amalungelo weKristu babona ngathi ukuziphatha komuntu besizweni kuyehla.
So to do God a service,
Ukwenzela uNkulunkulu umsebenzi,
they are going to enforce morality.
bazogcizelela lokuziphatha kahle emntwini.
So they are going to oppose abortion,
Bazolisana nokukhishwa kwezisu,
they are going to oppose homosexuality,
bazolisana nalokhu ubulilo ofanayo ukuthi buhlangane.
enforce Sunday worship
Bagcizelela ukuthi abantu bekhonze ngosuku lokuqala
for the good of the nation,
ukuze isizwe sibe sibe sihle.
right? So they have this righteous agenda to make people moral.
Bananenhloso lena enhle ukuthi benze abantu babe ngabantu abafanele abakahle.
How many of us, when Obama was giving the gays and lesbians their rights, responded in the right manner to that issue when it arose?
Bangakhi bethu abaphendula ngendlela efanele inkathi uPresident Obama enikeza amalungelo kulabo.
How many of you responded in the right manner?
Bangakhi bena abaphendula ngendlela efanele.
Did we not all think that Obama is not a good president because promoting gay and lesbian tendencies?
Ngabe sonke zange siqabanga ukuthi akasuka umongameli omuhle ngokuvumela lezi zinto.
Because we felt that his actions were going to promote bad behavior.
Ngoba besicabanga ukuthi izenzo zakhe zizoletha ukuziphatha okubi.
So in order to fix Obama's presidency, we need a man who can promote morality.
Ukuze silungise le nkinga lena kume sidinga umuntu ozohambisa okanye ozophakamisa ukuziphatha kahle.
So we're going to take away the religious liberties and the civil liberties of these individuals
Sizothatha inkululeko yalabantu
and force them to do the right thing.
bese sibaphoqela ukubana benze into efanele.
Because it is right to do the right thing.
Ngokuba kuhle ukwenza into enhle,
So we're going to enforce it.
sizoyiphoqelela.
In the church, we do the same thing.
Senze into efanayo nasebandleni.
We want people to behave a certain way.
Sifuna abantu ukuthi baziphathe ngendlela ethile.
So we're going to enforce that.
Sizophoqelela
Because it's the right thing to do.
ngokuba kuyinto efanele ubani yenziwe.
But is that the spirit of Protestantism?
Ngabe lokho kumoya weqiniso wamaProtestant.
While we are seeking to oppress, while nations have set off to oppress people and control their behaviors,
Kungani sifuna ukuqindezela ngenkathi izizwe nazenze lokufana nabo.
what they've done is stifled the development of the individual.
Ebakwenzile ukwehlisa okanye uqinezela ukukhula komuntu.
We feel that if we enforce morality, people will become good at creating.
Sicabanga ukuthi uma ngabe sigqizelela ukuziphatha kahle nokuphila kahle abantu bazokhona ukudala kanti futhi bekhule kule nto leyo.
But actually the opposite is true.
Kepha kahle kahle kuzoyenzeka lokho okuphikisana nalokho.
Protestantism is an influence for good.
Protestantism iletha ithela amava amahle.
It's the freedom of conscience allow the individuals to have freedom of conscience.
Inkululeko into lethi inkululeko kunembeza yiyo leyenza ukuthi unembeza ukhululeke.
And it is a power that comes into the life of an individual
Ngamandla afikayo emntwini
and the society,
nasemphakathini
directing their efforts to nobler objects.
ehola imisebenzi yabo ukuthi ibe ngendlela efanele.
What was life like in the 1260s?
Ngabe impilo beyinjani ngesikhathi se-1260?
What was the education level of people?
Ukufunda kwabantu bekunjani?
Why do we call it the Dark Ages?
Kungani sibiza ngesikhathi sobumnyama?
People couldn't read or write. Simple. You can just take that simple example. People couldn't read, they couldn't write, and that's why the church could oppress them because they couldn't read the scriptures for themselves.
Abantu bebangakwazi ukufunda nokubhala yingakho ibandla bekade beqindezela ngoba bebangakwazi ukuzifundela khona ngokwabo.
They are trying to enforce morality. The church.
Bezama ukuletha ukuziphatha kahle ebandleni
by forcing Sunday upon the people.
ngokuthi belethe umthetho wokukhonza ngosuku lokuqala ebantwini.
As a result, Europe was blind in darkness.
Ngaloko ke usizwe seYurophu sangene kumnyameni.
How does God solve the problem?
Ulungisa kanjani ke lena nkinga uNkulunkulu?
Set the people free to worship me according to the dictates of their own conscience.
Yekela abantu bengikhonze ngendlela unembeza wabo bahola ngakhona.
This is what makes America good.
Lokhu yiko okwenza iAmerica ibana ibe inkulu.
Because out of this darkness came a great nation
Ngokuba phakathi kwalobumnyama kuphume isizwe esikhulu.
in which everybody could read and write.
Lapho khona wonke umuntu ekhona ukufunda nokubhala.
I would like us to see
Ngifuna sibone
that when true Protestantism becomes part of our thinking,
ukuthi uProtestant bangempela uma ngabe kuba yingxenye yokucabanga kwethu.
that will permit the highest development of the individual.
Lokho kuzovumela ukukhula okukhulu komuntu.
When you're seeking to develop an individual,
Uma ngabe ufuna ukukhulisa umuntu,
give them freedom of conscience.
banike
Religious liberty is the key to intellectual development, is the key to scientific development, is the key to technological development, is the key to our development concerning the prophetic message.
Inkululeko yezokholo kuyisikhiya ukubala nathi khona uqondo ngalezo wesiprofeto kuyisikhiya ukuthi umuntu akhule kwezolwazi.
Because it permits the human to develop to the highest possible accomplishment.
Ngokuba kuvumela umuntu ukuthi akhule ngezinga eliphezulu kakhulu.
It frees the conscience to wake up the intellect.
Ikhulula unembeza ukuthi ukhone ukuvusa uqondo.
That society may resume its march to its high glory.
Ukuthi isizwe sikhona ukusungula uhambo lwalo ukazibuleni enkulu.
So I've got about 10 minutes left.
Nemizuzu nje ishumi sele.
What I want to do now is to define terms.
Engifuna ukwenza manje ukuthi unikeza incazelo kulamagama.
We're going to go to a book, Bible Training School. I think it's a journal, Bible Training School, BTS 4.2. This was by A.T. Jones.
Ibhalwa A.T. Jones.
He's going to define what religious liberty is.
Uzonikeza incazelo ukuthi inkululeko yezonkolo kuyini.
First, by defining the word religion.
Uzoqala achazele igama lithi inkolo.
What is religion?
Ngabe kuyini inkolo?
Religion is the duty which we owe to our Creator.
Inkolo kumsebenzi osukholodayo kumdali wethu.
It's not the duty I owe to you.
Akusumsebenzi okholodayo kuwena.
It's the duty I owe to my Creator.
Kungumsebenzi engikholodayo kumdali wami.
It's twofold. The duty to the Creator. Duty to Creator.
Umsebenzi wokudala.
The second thing,
Kwesibili,
the manner of discharging that duty.
indlela yokukhipha lo msebenzi.
Are we getting the distinction?
Ngabe siyabona nokuhlukana.
Do you see that there's a distinction?
Ngabe siyabona ukuthi kukhona ukungafani.
Because you might recognize your duty to God
Ngokuba mhlawumbe ungawuqonda okanye ukubona umsebenzi wakho kuNkulunkulu,
and fail in discharging that duty.
kepha uhluleke ukuwenza lo msebenzi.
So both principles are needed.
Zombili lezi zimiso
That you need to recognize your duty to God
ukuthi kumele ubone umsebenzi wakho kuNkulunkulu,
and you have to discharge that duty.
kumele futhi ukwenze lo msebenzi.
So that's what religion is about.
Inkolo imayelana nalokho.
All our religious exercises,
Yonke imisebenzi yethu emayelana nenkolo,
whether it's having devotion, prayer, going to a camp meeting,
noma ngabe ubuya ekhempini okanye ukuthandaza okanye ukufunda,
that is what you have freely determined to be the manner in which you will discharge your duty to God.
indlela wena unqumile ukuthi uzoyisebenzisa ukwenza umsebenzi wakho kuNkulunkulu.
So if we all acknowledge that we are created beings,
Uma ngabe siyakuvuma ukuthi sonke singabantu abadaliweyo,
we have a duty to our Creator.
sinomsebenzi esilindelwe mana siwenze umdali wethu.
Next is the word liberty.
Okulandelayo legama lithi ukhululeka nokukhululeka.
Liberty is the state of being exempt from the domination of others or from restricting circumstances.
Inkululeko isimo lapho khona umuntu esuswa eqindezelweni okanye ngamandla abuya kwabanye.
Did you get that?
Ngabe siqondile lokho.
You have a responsibility to your God,
Unomsebenzi kumele uwenze uNkulunkulu wakho.
and you have to discharge that responsibility one way or the other.
Kumele uwenze lo msebenzi.
Religious liberty guarantees that you do that without being dominated by another individual or an organization or a system or a nation.
Inkululeko kwezenkolo ikunikeza isiqiniseko sokuthi ukhona ukwenza lokho ngaphandle kokuthi uqindezele omunye umuntu okanye inhlangano noma ngabe yini.
God has designed that we are to execute that duty in circumstances that are non-restrictive.
uNkulunkulu wenze kubana ukuthi khona ukwenza lo msebenzi lona lapho khona sithola sezimeni ezingasivimbi ngalutho.
Religious liberty, therefore, is man's exemption from the domination of others or from restricting circumstances.
Inkululeko ukhishwa komuntu lapho khona ezoqindezelwa omunye umuntu okanye inhlangano ethile.
Man's freedom to make his choices and decide his conduct for himself.
Inkululeko yomuntu ukuthi yena azenzele izinqumo zakhe ukuthi uzoziphatha kanjani.
It must be done spontaneously and voluntarily.
Lokho kumele kwenzeke ukuthi yena azinikele.
Since God has created man in the nature of things, the first of all relationships is that to God. And the first of all duties could be nothing but duty to God.
Njengoba uNkulunkulu emdalile umuntu, ngakho ke umsebenzi wokuqala womuntu kumele uyele kuye uNkulunkulu.
Though that is the first of all possible relationships and the first of all duties, though that relationship and duty are inherent in the very existence of intelligent creatures, yet even in that inherent obligation, God has created every intelligent creature free to recognize that obligation or not. God has created you free to recognize that obligation or not to recognize it.
uNkulunkulu ukudalile wakhulula ukuthi ukhona ukubona lo msebenzi okanye ukhetha ungawuboni.
You're free to not recognize God?
ukhululekile ukuba ungamboni uNkulunkulu
It's your God-given freedom.
uNkulunkulu ukunikile leyo nkululeko
So if God himself frees himself from forcing you,
uma ngabe uNkulunkulu yena ngokwakhe akuphoqeleli
no person, no individual, no church, no institution, no nation should take that duty upon themselves.
asikho isizwe inhlangano ibandla okanye umuntu omele wenze lo msebenzi loyo
Free to discharge that duty or not, just as he chooses accordingly. It is written, choose you this day whom you will serve. Whosoever will, let him take the water. In what manner? Freely. Thus, it is absolutely true that in religion, in the duty which we owe to our Creator and the manner of discharging it, God has created man entirely exempt from the domination of others and from restricting circumstances, has made him free to make his choice and decide his conduct for himself spontaneously and voluntarily. Thus, religious liberty is the gift of God, inherent in the gift of rational existence itself. I believe that if we truly embrace the spirit of Protestantism as God's people here in the last days,
ngiyakholwa ukuthi njengabantu kaNkulunkulu esikhathini sokugcina uma ngabe singawuthatha lo moya wamaProtestant
our hearts will be renewed.
inhliziyo zethu zizoguquka
Our minds will be vivified,
imiqondo yethu izovuswa
which means a new life comes into them.
okuchaza ukuthi impilo yethu izongena kuwona
The creative power of Protestantism will be given a platform.
amandla okudala uProtestant izonikezwa indawo yokusebenza
The intellect will be awakened
umqondo okuqonda kuzovuswa
so that you and I
ukuze mina nawe
will resume our march
sisungule uhambo lwethu
to the end as 144,000.
ukuya kupheleni njenge-144,000
Those special people that we are called to be part of.
labantu esibizele ukuba sibe ingxenye yabo
Sister White says that we should strive to be among the 144,000.
utata wayethi uthi kumele sizame ukuthi sibe phakathi kwe-144,000
It's not in the restrictive circumstances that we may create one on another that will promote development. It's not by creating restrictive circumstances that creativity and development is promoted among God's people.
akusukuthi senza isimo lapho khona kuzovinjwa ukukhula kwabantu abantu kaNkulunkulu
Because what God did in the beginning when He created man
ngokuba lo wakwenzile uNkulunkulu ekufanele umadala umuntu
was to mold him and make and shape him.
ukuthi amenze ngendlela efanele
He created a beautiful garden for him,
base wenza indawo enhle for
and He gave him the earth to have dominion over.
wase unika umhlaba ukuthi abuse bona
But most of all, He gave him freedom of choice.
kepha kubo konke wamnika inkululeko ukuthi azikhethele
But I want us to see
kepha ngifuna sibone lokhu
that freedom of choice
inkululeko yokuzikhethela
is the thing, the principle
kuyisimiso leso
that brings about
esiletha
noble aspiration.
izifiso ezihle
In designing that God wants to have noble beings,
uNkulunkulu ufuna ukuba nabantu abahle
He gives them freedom.
ubanika inkululeko
Here at the end of the world,
nabo ekuphileni komhlaba
you and I are expected to have a proper understanding of what religious liberty is all about.
mina nawe silindele ukubana siqonde kabanzi ukuthi ngabe ukukhululeka kwezenkolo kuyini
Because we made mistakes in 2016 as a movement.
amaphutha ngo-2016 njengenhlangano
And Sunday law is coming up.
iyeza isanelo
Time of troubles are coming up.
izikhathi zenhlupheko ziyeza
It's going to get more and more difficult.
kuzoqhubeka kube nzima kakhulu
God wants us to have a proper grasp of what the fundamentals of being a Christian are all about.
uNkulunkulu ufuna sifuna sibe noqonda obalekile ukuthi isimamiso sebuKristu kuyini.
So that the ensign that God is seeking to lift up,
Ukuthi lokho uNkulunkulu afuna ukuphakamisa,
when it's lifted up,
ukuthi masekuphakanyisiwe,
it will draw the world to itself.
kuzodonsa umhlaba wonke kuze kubone.
True development, I mean, to really be a good Christian,
Ukuthi ube ngumKristu omuhle,
the ideal Christ-like person,
lo ufana noKristu,
you need your intellect
udinga umqondo wakho,
and you need your moral intelligence.
udinga nokuziphatha kwakho okuhlonipheka.
And it's religious liberty that permits that to wake up out of sleep.
Kuyinkululeko kwezenkolo okwenza lokho ukuthi
In our next lecture after lunch, we'll go into the duty. You know, now that we have understood, we are free to do what we want.
njengoba sesiqondile ukuthi sekululekile usenze noma ngabe sini sikufunayo.
Don't run away with this and think you can just do anything. Your religious duty, you have a duty. So we're going to look at the body, why God gave it to us.
Ungahambi nalokho kwaba ukuthi uvunyelekile ukwenza noma ngabe yini, sizobheka umsebenzi walomzimba uNkulunkulu asinikeze.
And you will quickly recognize that this freedom
bese uzobona ukuthi le nkululeko le
comes with serious obligations.
iza nemisebenzi ebuqayi kakhulu.
But it's important to recognize the freedom that you have.
Kepha kubalulekile ukuthi sibone le
To
nkululeko esinayo.
exercise as you want.
Sisebenzisa ngale ndlela esifuna ngakhona.
Shall we pray?
Sizokhuleka. Our dear Father in heaven, we thank you, Lord, for this wonderful opportunity to understand the privilege which you've given unto us individuals. You have given us, Lord, the freedom of choice, and this shows how loving you are to us, and this shows how wonderful you want us to have a relationship together. May you enable each and every one of us to understand this and be able to practice it for the development of our fellow brethren, our society, our church, and also individually. So continue to guide us and continue to lead us. We thank you, Lord, for this privilege to be chosen to hear this single message. May you help us to understand and respond effectively unto the understanding of what you've given unto us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.